Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth episode of Conversations with Musicians. I am super excited to welcome our next guest. He is a solo artist from Prince Edward Island. Here is Dylan Menzie.
Hey Matt,
Hey, how's it going?
it's going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good,
Just
good.
loving the stash, man. It's throwing me off.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I started growing that out last month sometime. I was like, well, it's I like puns a lot, so I was saying like, oh, I'll grow a Chris mustache, and then it just like stuck.
Looks good.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, the first question I like to always ask people is how did you get into music? Like, what instrument did you pick up first, kind of thing? And yeah, what got you
Yeah.
writing music and stuff?
When I first started, I was about 7 years old, and I grew up in a house. I have three brothers, so two older and one younger. And so my older brothers had already played a bunch of music anyway, and there was just like instruments laying around. We had like a drum kit, a couple guitars around, and just all over the place. And I remember watching James and the Giant Peach for the first time and seeing like the really dapper grasshopper and
What
thinking like,
movie?
oh my God, yeah, me too. And I was like, I love this grasshopper, and the fiddle that he's playing sounds gorgeous. So like I started on fiddle when I was about 7 years old and got really into like East Coast icons like Natalie McMaster and those kind of like really and like oh my God, Ashley McIsaac, like these kind of like East Coast fiddlers. So that's where I really started. And I did that for a couple years. And in the meantime, I was also taking piano lessons and I was doing trumpet lessons at that time too. And then in junior high, I moved on to drums. So, and then in high school, I started picking up the guitar and writing songs. And then, so that's basically how I started in the instruments that I took up in my younger years. And now I just kind of experiment like with a bunch of different stuff. I know a little bit of banjo, a little bit of accordion, a little bit just like jack of all trades kind of thing. Because
Did you
I find,
start off singing too, or was that like something that you progressed into, like in?
yeah, that was just in high school when I started writing songs. I just it just came naturally that I would just start singing. And I liked to sing songs behind the piano and stuff when I was younger. And I even did one time, I used to do all kinds of ceilidhs in little churches around PEI when I was growing up doing fiddle music. But this one time, uh, I was a huge SpongeBob SquarePants fan growing up. And there was a song in one of the episodes called When I Ripped My Pants. And so
Yeah.
I did a version of that at one of the ceilidhs. I just went up. It's probably the first time that I ever sang anything in front of people. Must have been 10 years old, and I did like an a cappella version of When I Ripped My Pants from SpongeBob. And then at the end of it, I had a little sheet of paper and I like ripped the sheet of paper into the microphone because it's like ripping your pants at the end of the song.
Everyone stood
So
up and was like,
that's where it all began. Exactly. That's where it all began, my singing career at that moment. And I knew that I it wasn't great, but I grew into a better singer over time.
just practice.
Just literal practice, yeah. And I do think like a lot of where I get power is probably from trumpet practice growing up and like using my diaphragm and making sure that that was like I had that training.
Yeah, I think I've heard you like say this before. As I think it was on the launch. I remember watching you on that show and stuff. You said that what you think that one of your most powerful things about your voice is your power, like to project. And
Mm,
your songs are like you project so well too, holding notes and
yeah,
stuff.
it's funny too because as I've progressed through like I find my songwriting is just getting better and better, especially in the last 2 3 years because I've been just home and like experimenting with new styles, experimenting with just new rhyme schemes and just places in terms of like subject matter, just trying to write stuff that I haven't written before. And so I've grown a lot in the last couple of years, and I've noticed that as my songwriting grows, I focus less on those big, powerful notes, and I'm more inclined to do a softer song with a better message than and save those moments for the key moments in a show, or like when it really hits really hard to do those, you know. But that's, again, it's just time and practice and like growth as an artist. That really, I found COVID really good, if nothing else, for growing as an artist and having the time to do that.
Yeah, I found your latest performance of Heart That Doesn't Want Mine, your live performance. I'm like, it
Mm,
sounds like fantastic, just like your range and stuff. Compared, like,
thanks, man.
don't get me wrong, the original recording itself, like the official audio, I love it
Mm.
too. But the live version, I always go back to that.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I love that take. And like, it was just so fun to get, again, just in my apartment, just a bunch of friends in and record something live off the floor. It was really fun. And also, too, with the live version, you do get that bigger vocal. I wanted it to feel like, because the recording is definitely more somber and more level in terms
Yeah,
of the vocal performance, which made sense, I think, for like the subject matter of the song and the tone and the personality of everything that was going on. Like, there wasn't huge uh heavy guitar solos and stuff, or like heavy, even like sounds. Everything was very warm and soft, so I wanted the vocals to feel that way too.
yeah,
But then in the live version, then I had like more of an acoustic guitar that was like holding the rhythm down with the drums, and I felt like I could go bigger because the guitar was doing more and there was less pieces like in the actual audio space. So I could go bigger with the vocals and not step on anything, or yeah. So it worked.
yeah. It makes sense. Like less production, so you got more room to extend your
Exactly. Yeah,
voice.
for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that too. Behind One Heart to Another, it's one of my
Yep.
like favorites off your latest album,
Oh, me
and I
too.
think it's around the bridge. I get like such Billie Jean vibes from like Michael Jackson when you come in. Your voice just like super powerful, and then it comes in with a funk bass.
Oh, yeah, yeah. In the outro bit just after the bridge.
Yeah,
Oh man. Yeah, I that's cool. Billie Jean. I've never got a Michael Jackson comparison before. That's really interesting. I wasn't thinking about Michael Jackson at all when doing the recording. We were more going for, I think it was like more of an MGMT vibe, or something along that lines is what we were picturing. But I mean, you never really, you have an influence or like a starting point, and then it just goes based off of feeling it from there. So it's cool to hear like Billie Jean as a, yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to listen to it again now with that in mind, because I don't.
yeah, just like the bass and the drum notes, and yeah, I think you shared out a few things I feel like Michael Jackson would do, like a whoop
uh
and stuff like that.
yes, for sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, when we were doing that, I was trying to channel like something like an Anderson Paak, so
Oh yeah,
that makes sense too for like a Michael Jackson, same sort of deal when it comes to those kind of like outro. I don't know, just playing with the vibe of the song and just singing whatever comes to your mind, kind of thing.
love it. What was that
Mm.
process like too? So you made that whole album with Ramesh, right? Hope I'm
Yeah,
saying that right.
yeah, Romesh Thavanathan. It was really interesting. It was the most interesting record I've ever made, because I think, first of all, like I learned so much from Romesh, like just like production techniques and song structure things, and just like creating vibes, creating like a story and characters within the music. So like the
That's cool.
character, yeah, like depending on what the song is, there's not necessarily like each, your voice doesn't always have to sound the same, because it depends on the subject matter of the song, what they're talking about, and who that character is, like the singer of the song, in that sense, which is me, but like you're creating a new version of yourself almost with each song. So that was a really big learning experience for me. And then on top of that, we were also we rented out this beautiful house in Newfoundland, on a cliffside for a whole month in February. So it was a bit strange to be there basically by myself, because Romish was in and out for like, 8 hours or 9 hours a day, depending. And then there were some studio players that came in for a week. But for the most part, it was just me and Romish in those 8 hours. And he was also recovering from a heart attack during that month and had a new baby. So it was like a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. And I found like I was alone a lot. And so like some of that isolation, I think, kind of found its way onto the recordings. And in a good way now, looking back on it, I'm really happy with it. But in the moment, there was some pretty hard times of like feeling pretty trapped in this house, and like I didn't have a car. I was waiting on Romish to come back and forth, and there was not really a town. There was one fish and chip spot that was open sometimes, and that was it. So if you had no food and there was nobody else there and it was storming out, it was pretty lonely and pretty isolating. And but I think in that and through that, some really great stuff came out of it.
Was that like early 2020 when you recorded all that then? Because I know, because your album came out
Yeah,
in the spring, right?
yeah. So it would have been, yeah, the spring of 2020. So no, this would have been spring of 2019. And then we kind of sat on the recordings and made some, like, definitely some at home recordings after the fact and overdubs and all that sort of stuff, like in the months after that. But yeah, majority of it was tracked there. And I mean, the space was beautiful, and recording was amazing. And just like having that time, the literal month, to just, like I said, like sit and only really think about the record and what was going to go on it. And like there was so many changes. Some of the songs like Spirit and even One Heart to Another and Church Bells, like all of these different things. When we did pre-production in November of 2018, we had all these plans. And then by the time that we were actually recording the record in February, it was like I had, well, because let's, from a timeline perspective, I had written the songs in like 2017, 20 or 2016 sometime. And then so I had been playing them live and sitting on them because my career at that point would have been only like 2 or 3 years old. So I needed new stuff to play on with the shows. And so some of the songs I was playing way before, and they've gone now through like 3 or 4 iterations of that song before it even got to the pre-production process. And then by that time, I'm already sick of them because I've been playing them for years. And so I'm
Yeah.
looking for like new ways to keep them fresh and exciting for like when the record comes out and when I have to continue to play them for years to come. And so a lot of changes, a lot of chord structure changes, melody changes, like anything and everything was on the table. And I think like in the end, everything was amplified and got, yeah, just a better product and a better song. So I'm really happy with how everything turned out, but it was definitely a lot of changes, a lot of like back and forth when in terms of production and what the song was going to be in the end, or what would work and what wouldn't work. But all of that is making a record and working with a producer, and like I don't want a producer that's just going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, that's great, or like, yep, sounds awesome, or like every time. Like I want somebody that's going to amplify the music and bring it to a level that I couldn't have or wouldn't have
Yeah,
thought of.
and push you. Yeah, I came
Exactly.
across a version of, yeah, you performing Lost in Dreams from like 2017 or 2018. I'm like, man, this sounds completely different.
Yeah, exactly. That's another one that really went through a lot of changes. But I like doing that too, because you find where the gem of the song really is, like you have to, I mean, if I was going to write a novel, or if I was going to write you know, um, even a short story or whatever, like I wouldn't submit the first draft to the publisher.
Yeah.
I would do more iterations and I would try other things, and I would see, how I could get the most emotional response from it, and from myself especially, because if you're not happy with it as the musician, then it's going to be hard to try and convince people to listen to it or want to listen to it too, right? So it's all about like, if you're not happy with it, I don't think it should go out, because you're just not going to want to promote something or like share a piece of yourself that you're not happy with. So, and then it's just this weird sort of resentment that you have with your own music, which I don't know if that should exist.
Yeah, and then you're the one who's got to perform it live too, especially if it becomes a
Mm.
fan favorite or something.
Yeah, exactly. That would
Just
be
like,
a nightmare, to have like a song that you absolutely hate become your biggest song.
yeah,
Yeah.
be in spite. Were you a fan of like Romesh and like Hey Rosetta before too? Because like I know I've been listening to them since like 2010 or whatever when their
Yeah.
second first album dropped.
At the time, I was dating a member of the band. So it was like, I just knew them all, and like had developed a good rapport with everybody, and thought it would be appropriate to like, hey, like Romish is trying to transition into a producing career, and I'm looking for somebody to do my next record, and I really get along with Romish and blah blah blah. And so that really like informed the decision to work with them. And then I had the absolute pleasure of having like pretty much everybody from the band be featured on the record as well, which was really amazing. And So yeah, but that's kind of how I was introduced. But I before I dating, like I when Kinley and I were dating, it was like I had never, like, just before that I had never really listened to them at all and didn't really know who they were. And so then I was introduced to the music like through that. And yeah, I mean, now they're amazing. Like one of the best bands from the East Coast for sure. Like the songwriting, the production, like everything is just spot on.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I'm not, I know they're from the East Coast, but I'm like, are they from PEI as well? Did they originate there?
Newfoundland, but St. John's, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Mm.
That's cool though. Funny how that all comes together. That's
It
interesting that
is,
you
right?
that you never even heard of them before too. But that's cool.
Yeah, actually, that's not true. When I was 19, I got a job with the East Coast Music Association doing like their ticketing. And then so in part of that job, they used to do this thing where you had to submit three physical copies of a record when you submitted for nominations. So I had all of these like the huge box of CDs from everybody that had submitted their applications. And throughout the months that I was working for ECMA, I would just listen to them all. I remember putting on a Hey Rosetta one because they were nominated, and I was like, oh sweet, like I'll throw this on. And it was Seeds, and the first song came on, and I was like, no, I hate this. I can't stand it. I don't like his voice. I don't like what's going on here with the mandolin. Like it's not for me. And I like just shut it off. And then cut to a few years later, and I'm working with the band on my own record. It's just weird. And like, I was too close minded on that first listen.
Yeah, it is a very different song. Seeds.
It is. And also though, I just found like when was introduced to the music, I came into like Second Sight, which was their last record. And so the music had really changed a lot. It was a lot more like math rock in some parts, and definitely softer tones, and not as like early 2000s sounding, which is, or like mid 2000s sounding, which is what they would have sounded like on Seeds. And I just like, I found that was a easier transition to get into the music than their younger years. And then, it was kind of like, yeah, I started with the fresh new stuff, saw them play live, and then like had a new appreciation for the music after that.
Yeah, I found that like your songs themselves too have significantly changed styles.
Yeah,
since your
absolutely.
first EP. It sounds like you kind of started off in folk almost and have transitioned over.
Yeah, and like I kind of do a bit of everything. Like I try and kind of play the field when it comes to genres a little bit, and just to like experiment and see what I can do and what I like to do, and but yeah, and then also throughout the years my influences have changed. Like I used to, and it's funny because now listening back to Lost in Dreams, I hear a little bit of where the music was headed, which is more in I like to think of myself now as like a mixture of Wilco, Fleet Foxes, and like I don't know, some sort of like Vampire Weekend esque thing. So it's like a little bit folky, a little bit Americana, a little bit rock pop, like that kind of vibe.
Yeah,
Um,
it's fitting.
and then that kind of is continuing. I have like 18 new songs that are in the can, like ready to be recorded, but I don't really know when or what to do with them right now. And if I'm going to keep releasing them as singles, maybe, or if I'm going to release them as a record, or some combination of both, probably. Um, but yeah, I just find that in the last couple of years, my influences have changed to like I literally didn't even listen to Wilco before like 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, and now they're like my obsession. My Spotify top 5 lists was just Wilco songs. It was like I can't get any. I can't listen to them any more than I already am. And when we were doing Lost in Dreams, Romish was like, I really hear like a lot of Wilco on this. Like, I really think we should push for a Wilco direction. And I was like, I don't really know. I don't know the reference. I can't really say if we should do that or not. And now in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I really should have gone a heavier leaning into this Wilco vibe, because that's where I feel the music going now, and I could have just made that transition a little bit faster. But I mean, everything comes in due time. And yeah, like the transition of those songs from Heather Avenue, and even like, and then I found I started to change shape with As the Clock Rewinds, when I did like the acoustic just redone versions of the songs from Adolescent Nature. Because like I don't know, just something clicked, and I found a different part of myself that I didn't know was there. And the producer Adam Gallant was another amazing producer that, in the same way that Romish is an Yes Man, like we had versions of a song called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, and that was supposed to be on As the Clock Rewinds, but we were going to do this. It was in 4/4, and then at the end we changed it to 6/8, and there was like a 30-second outro that was in 6/8, and then the rest of the song, the beginning, was in 4/4. But the 4/4 part, and this was the part, it was like 2.5 minutes, that had all the lyrics, all the vocals, like most of the production. It was like just not hitting right. It didn't quite feel great. But the outro, the 6/8 part, was feeling amazing. So it was just like, okay, well, let's just like cut the whole song and just leave that little outro bit at the end, call it something else, and keep that on the record. And those are the kind of things that I really like. I like when a producer kind of has the balls to be like, hey, this isn't working and we should move on. Because like otherwise I feel like I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting their time, and we're not growing together, and we're not like making something. I don't know, you kind of need that pull, that tug, to like make something really great.
Yeah, that's nice to have someone that's honest like that in the room, especially, yeah, like you're saying, you're not wasting each other's time. And
Yeah,
what,
and I just don't.
so
There's nothing worse than somebody who's just going to be, then just agrees with everything you say, whether they believe it or not. Like I hate that. That's just not a personality that I want to work with in a musical situation.
do you find like when you worked with, so Adam, did
Yep.
he involve, did he like co-write with you in that process too? Like renditioning
Not
those songs, for example?
sometimes more, like not in terms of really. the song structure, aside from that one Winterlude where we just completely cut it. But for the most part, I had done demos on Logic on my little laptop, just very basic kind of production things, like a little, mostly just vocals, a couple harmony parts, and some lead lines and a little drum beat that was just a plinky little drum machine, just to get a feeling for what it would be if we went in. So most of that stuff is what ended up being on the record, but just a way more quality version of whatever those demos were, with added parts and like definitely creating space, like textures and sonic space, and making everything fit in that space really well. Like Adam took that and just made it sound huge. And like, so like it's one of my favorite things that I've done still to this day, is that As the Clock Rewinds record. And it just
Yeah,
feels so great.
your Talk to Me rendition, there's like
Mm.
so much more space in it. I find it just like hits me. It gives me like goosebumps and feels every time.
Yeah. And I thanks. I really like that one too. And I thought that was the first time that I felt like the productions weren't stepping on the music at all. Like, or like I wasn't trying
Yeah.
to add too much, you know. I created some space, and the space actually made it feel bigger, and like made it feel like there was more going on because you could hear every detail. And I really like that production style, and I'm going to try and do more of that in the future.
Yeah, some more slow jams.
Yeah, and not necessarily even slow, just less parts played better. So like, you know, if I was going to have a guitar on the track, I want to make sure that I'm only having that maybe one guitar or two, but making sure that that guitar part is amazing and like really holds its own without anything else going on. Or like, you don't need to put a 6 string and a 12 string and a whatever on there and a Nashville strung guitar on all on the same thing. They're all doing like chug lug, uh rhythm stuff. And it's like, well, like what is this accomplishing other than just like noise, just a wall of sound? And it's like, it's not really accomplishing much in terms of the sonic space. It's more just there because you didn't really know what else to put there, it seems. Or like you're trying to fill the space with just sound when really what you need is a better written part.
Yeah.
And like, and I don't, so yeah, so that's something that's really changed in the last couple of years, is my attitude towards like the composition of a song, and especially the production of a song.
Yeah, I think you hitting the hammer on the head there. A lot of
Yeah.
people, I think, can fall down that wrong rabbit hole, just like adding
Yeah.
things because they feel like they need to.
And especially now because the options are limitless. So you can go on and you have access to do anything and everything you want. You can get the best drum samples ever. You can have like 12 pianos on there if you want. You could do literally whatever you want with this, with DAWs now. And it's like, there's a real fine line between like just getting lost in that, down that rabbit hole of samples, and like who's really going to care about how much time it took you to pick the snare drum sound. Like it really
Yeah.
isn't going to matter that much in the end. And like, or maybe it is if it's a really iconic sound. Like that's another thing too though. But as long as it's like that, you could spend 25 minutes going over a snare drum sound, but if it's like a key player in the vibe of the song, then it could be worth it. But if it's just in the background on the twos and fours, and it's just like to keep the rhythm, like why are you spending so much time on that? Like write an amazing lead part, or like some sort of thing that complements the melody that's going on, so that it creates more texture and more intricate production underneath it. That's kind of, and I like to have space and let the vocals take up a lot of space in my music anyway. There's not as many like guitar solos and stuff. It's very vocal based.
Yeah, I found myself too, like trying to write at times where you have so many options to the point where it's just overwhelming, and then you just want to stop and like walk away from it because you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I have 90 snares to choose from.
Yeah. And you spend, yeah, like an hour going through every one of them because you want to, weigh all your options out. But then by the time you do that, you can't even remember what the first one that you liked was anyway, or, you have to go through again and fix it or like change it, or I don't know. It just seems like a waste of time. And depending on who you ask, like some people are sonic architects and they just love to design sounds like that and to create those spaces. But then you have other producers that like somebody like a Daniel Lanois, who basically would say, all right, well, for this record, we have 8 instruments, right? That's our palette. That's what we're playing with. And we're not doing anything else. Everything on the record has to be with those instruments. So you're kind of like putting yourself in a box so that you can like break out of that box using the tools that you have and not these endless options. And that's a really cool way of making a record too. I've never done that, like where there was just a limit and you couldn't break from that. Like obviously on most of the stuff, it's a lot of acoustic guitars. It's a lot of like tinier drum sets, and then also maybe some electric, but like the palette for my music hasn't really shifted that much. But I've never had like the experience of being like, okay, well, we're going to have banjo, we're going to have guitar, we're going to have that on and or whatever on every song, and that's all we could do. Like nothing else. Which
But you
I think
don't
would be a
typically
really, really
use
cool way.
like you don't typically use MIDI sounds though. You record with like real life instruments, right? So I
Yeah,
guess it could
sometimes.
depend on what you own or what's available to you.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, like the studio space really determines what kind of we use. Like what do they have on hand? What samples do they have? Like I know there's a lot of dulcimer sounds and stuff. Like I don't know how to play dulcimer, but I can figure out the notes on the keyboard and play it, to sound like a dulcimer if the sample is really great. Um, and so like I'm not opposed to using samples or MIDI, like whatever gets the creative job done, I'm for. But I just don't like when things are just huge for no reason.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your. I listened to all the episodes when as they were coming out to your podcast as like a creative
Oh, sweet.
diversion of your Lost in Dreams album. You had like so much creativity around that album between like the
Yeah.
graphics and the EPs releasing out and the podcast. And what was
Yeah.
it like
I
making the podcast?
It was really cool. Like I've never really interviewed anybody before. So that was an interesting process. And then I did all the editing myself as well. So like most of the conversations were about sometimes between like an hour to an hour and a half. But then when I edited them down, it was like between 30 and 45 minutes of usable stuff. Because sometimes I found that when we were recording, people would get sidetracked and they'd kind of go halfway down a tangent and then they wouldn't really wrap up the story. And then so I was like, well, it didn't end and I don't know how to use it now. So I'm probably just going to cut the whole thing out and then we'll move on to like the next question or whatever. So that was interesting to like go through an interviewing process and figure out how to do that. And then also editing a podcast and figuring out how to do that. And making it sound like the conversation was still natural, even though we were cutting whole sections of it out. And figuring out the right place to like break it and then bring it back in was an interesting process. But then also just like talking with songwriters from PEI was a real treat. And also I love dreams and I love talking about dreams. And I really liked hearing other people's experiences with their dreams and hearing like if it had any effect on their creativity. And if it didn't, most of the time it didn't, but it's just a great way to like break the ice too. So if you're starting off with, because people, when they talk about their dreams, they talk about their hopes, they talk about like, and I mean, it could be dreams as in like, like literal dreams while you're asleep, or also it was also just life dreams or goals in some aspects too. So I found that people, when they talk about dreams in any aspect, they really reveal a lot of themselves. They reveal their fears, they reveal, their excitements, what they're like, and a lot of times too, like their traumas, and it all comes out. And it's a really easy way to get them to feel comfortable and like talking about themselves and about deeper things. And then so when we got into the other questions, it felt natural and it felt like we already had something. And a lot of the people I already knew too. So there wasn't like a huge gap within like, meeting somebody and then having to ask them all these personal questions. Like I kind of knew them already.
Yeah, that makes it a lot easier. But that would
Yeah.
like jumpstart making someone feel more relaxed and getting
Yeah,
to know them
exactly.
quickly.
Yeah, and that's a huge part too, is of getting good stuff, is like they have to feel relaxed. They have to
Yeah.
feel like you, and especially for a podcast too, because you don't want it to, you want it to sound like a fun environment to be in. You want to hear the smiles.
You had some like pretty awesome people on there too. You knew
Yeah,
the majority of your guests beforehand?
I did. Yeah, like I didn't know Jonathan. I had met him twice, Jonathan Torrence. Um, but I didn't really, I've never really had a conversation with him. It was just kind of like in passing, and he knew who I was because of music, and I know who he was because he's Jonathan Torrens and he's amazing. And then a couple of the other ones, like Cheryl Wagner, she does the Prince Edward Island, the PI Film Festival here. So I had seen her and met her through that. And then also like Catherine McClellan, we had played some shows together and, done some conferences and things where we were in the same spot, know her. And then also, like I said, in dating my ex, I got to know the members of Hey Rosetta. So I knew Tim already and had kind of, and then, yeah, the other one's just local songwriters and people. One of the people that I didn't know really at all, his name is Ni Adeogun, and I had never really met him before, but I came across his stuff on Instagram, his artwork, and I was just blown away, especially on PEI. I had never seen anything like that come out. And
Is
then
he the
so when we
guest?
did,
Oh, sorry. Is he the guest who was making like a piece of art like every day? His like
yeah,
challenge? Yeah.
yeah,
I was
exactly.
mind blown by that. I'm like, holy jeez.
Yeah, me too. And I think he's still putting out crazy amounts of stuff and content. Like he's just hyper creative guy and really driven. Yeah. But when I first saw his stuff, I was like, wow. I mean, if we're gonna talk about dreams and have like all types of artists on, including graphic artists, like I would love to have him on. And then when we met, I really enjoyed his presence and being around him, and I also was already a massive fan of his artwork. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to have him do the artwork for the podcast? So that's all his designs for that.
That's cool. The
Yeah,
artwork too, or just the podcast, like the album
just the
artwork?
podcast artwork. The album artwork was done by a friend of mine, Ashley and Clark.
Yeah, it's some awesome visuals. Even your like if you go on like YouTube and watch your audio clips too, they're all
Yeah,
interchangeable too.
that was done by another friend of mine, Aiden Searle. I like hiring graphic artists to do really amazing pieces because I'm not a visual artist. Like I can come up with like an idea, but I don't know how to actually put it out into a visual aspect. Um,
Heather Avenue,
so
you're like, here's my house.
yeah, that's basically me.
Yeah.
And then but then yeah, for this one I was like, well, it should feel dreamy, it should feel like kind of like kaleidoscopy, and like, so I have amazingly talented friends that are really, really great visual artists. And so I went with, first of all, with Ashley doing the album artwork. I was like, I have this idea, and like the record kind of bounces from like, country to pop to, more folk based stuff. And like, I want it to feel, I have this idea for like a guy sitting on a horizon line, and out of the back of his head, it's a silhouette. And out of the back of his head is like an explosion of ideas, just like all different colors exploding out of the back of his head, as like to signify that there's a lot of stuff going on this record, and like just a mishmash of a bunch of different ideas and different genres. And then so she took that idea and just like completely made it her own, and way better than the idea that I had originally thought of. And then so from that point you have this incredible artwork that you can just take from. And then so you go to Aiden, he does his amazing animations with it. And then, same even with the Lost in Dreams artwork for the podcast, like we've kind of played off of those themes, and like even like the splitting of the head and like opening it up. Oh man, I just love working with really, really great visual artists, because it gives the music another layer when there's something tangible that you can see.
Yeah, even like audio clips now, people always like to have like a visualizer or something's like moving or something just to keep people's attention, really.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we live in a very starved for attention age, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too, just sort of a general question, whether that be off your last album or your newest song, what song would you say would be your favorite that you've ever released?
Ever released? Hmm. It's a tough one, because there's some songs that I really love for the production, and then there's other songs that I really love for the lyrics, So lyrically, yeah, I'd say A Heart That Doesn't Want Mine is probably my best, in terms of like conveying exactly what I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say it, and the production matching that, and everything coming together really nicely. But then in terms of like production and what I have the most fun playing now, like One Heart to Another is so fun to play. And I really think like we did something great on the record that now when we play it live is just even better than that. So it's like I said, again, like the record is one iteration of the song, and then the live performance after the record comes out is another one. And so it's like the third or fourth, or actually probably fifth or sixth version of the song now, and I just love playing it. But in terms of the actual production, I think A Heart That Doesn't Want Mine has got to take it.
Yeah, I saw a clip. This thing was just taken off someone's phone at one of your recent shows, and you're like right after the bridge, you're like doing a guitar solo. Just sounds completely different from the recording itself too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I'm not like a great lead player, so I had to really practice for to do guitar solos, and like that was a really cool, like just moment of growth for me, to be like, oh well, I'm gonna do some more lead stuff now, and work on. I like I said, a big Wilco fan, so in that guitar solo, there's like a crazy, just like I'm basically just wailing on the guitar as fast as I can, and just like creating a noise and then moving forward. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that solo.
I think you stage dived. You took your shirt off.
Yeah. Which didn't really work, because with COVID there was only like 30 people there, 30 to 50 people. So, they didn't want to touch me. 6 feet.
School rock, Jack
Yeah,
Black. Hits the floor.
I fell right to my face. Yeah.
You kind of touched on some equipment that you use, like Logic for recording, but I was going to ask that sort of what equipment they use. And then I always like to end off asking people if they have any cool tips for musicians.
Yeah. So in terms of audio equipment, I work a lot with Logic, is the DAW that I use, but I just bought a new desktop and I'm making the transition from Apple to Windows. So I think I'll do that transition into using Pro Tools. And then I have like just a little for like recording on the go. I like to use a little Scarlett 2i2 and some, and then I have a preamp that I use, a little tiny one that goes with it. And then I also have like a larger Scarlett 18i20 that I do if I want to do drums or like something with multiple inputs, or I needed it for the podcast because I needed many inputs for all the voices. Uh, and then yeah, I just use a little tiny keyboard for the most of my stuff, and a lot of acoustic instruments is my big, that's my bread and butter. And in terms of some tips, there's one tip that I don't know, I don't even know if it helps really or if it doesn't help, but I find it makes a difference. So I was watching a Logic walkthrough with an artist named Jacob Collier. He was like this young guy, English guy, basically like a theory wizard and genius, mad scientist. And he was going through his Logic session, which has like something like 600 tracks or some ridiculous number of different things.
That's
And one
nuts.
of his, yeah, and that was like a smaller song in his uh, like DAW. So he said in his walkthrough that one thing that he likes to do is take room noise. So he'll just take like a 30-second clip of just dead silence in the room and then do just that noise and carry that noise underneath the entire track. So you just keep repeating that 30-second just like buzz or hiss. And then it creates a sonic space for everything to live in, right? So it's like, oh, well, this is what the room sounds like when there's nobody here, but the listener will notice, like you can notice if, say, you had a recording of a guitar part and there's a little bit of a buzz on the amp, and then it cuts out all of a sudden because you cut the audio file, and then 30 seconds later the buzz comes back in with the guitar because now the audio file is there again. So you don't get that as much if you do like a one steady room noise under everything, because it just feels like everything's living in that same space. Like it's kind of like the foundation upon which you're going to build all your instruments on top of it, because that little bit of room noise is going to make everything feel really cohesive in like one thing. So that's something that I've been trying to take maybe into, I did it with A Heart That Doesn't Want Mine, and I'm going to keep experimenting with it to see if it really makes a difference, or if that was just like something that just felt right in that particular song. But according to Jacob Collier, it does make things feel more cohesive. So that would
A
be a
cool
tip.
trick.
Yeah, just to
Yeah,
make
I'm gonna
things
give
like
that a try.
feel, yeah, and give it a try and let me know what you think about it, because I really thought it worked for A Heart That Doesn't Want Mine, just to make it feel like one, like everything is living in one room, all the instruments.
Yeah, it probably makes it feel like everything's done like all together in one take almost in a room.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have those like cuts, or like if your vocal is a little bit noisy or whatever, a little bit of buzz, you don't hear it as much because you have buzz under everything.
If you want to close off, if you have any projects or anything coming up you want to like shout out.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm just kind of in the studio here at home, just doing some demos and getting things ready. But I'm hoping to have another single coming out in the next few months, and probably in the next 2 months or so. Hopefully, I'll go back into the studio sometime in February here. Uh,
Sweet.
and then, yeah, I mean, you can just follow my socials on Instagram, Dylan underscore Menzie, and not really on Twitter that much, but Facebook is like Facebook/Dylan Menzie band. And that's basically it. Yeah, I'm just gearing up for a new year here.
Checking out the Bandcamp if anyone wants to buy some
Yeah,
CDs.
definitely check out the Bandcamp.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put the links below on the video when this goes out too, and let you know.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Matt. This has been really fun. So fun to like talk about yourself. I don't do it
Yeah.
that often.
Yeah, it's nice to chat with you again. I remember when I met you, you were like super nice and easy to talk to.
Yeah. Well, it's great to chat again.